We actually are lucky because we've got two users of the software here in the audience, Don Dernberg from Pace University and Phil Bohl from Pepperdine University. And they've both been using the software for a long while. What it's designed to do is build a course schedule. This is a task that is often done by associate deans, sometimes registrars, and it's a task that people often spend a lot of time on. In our school, I don't teach in a law school, I teach at the hotel school at Cornell, but the person who was used to develop our schedule would spend about a month every semester trying to put it together. And people have strategies or approaches where they use whiteboards with colored Post-it notes and a lot of different manual approaches to this problem. Really what the software is designed to do is simplify that task significantly. What it uses is information on faculty, information on students, and information on your facilities. And I'm going to concentrate primarily on that. The point of the software, though, is sort of what's running here right now. And this is the automated scheduler. And it's been running for 13 minutes. And it's generated 100,000 schedules. Anybody do manual scheduling in here? Okay, well, I defy you to get 100,000 schedules in 13 minutes if you do it manually. You're going to spend a lot of time to get one. The advantage of using the computer for this is it's able to look at a lot of different configurations, find schedules that are good for everybody that's involved. And I'll come back and talk more about what this is showing in a few minutes. What my hope would be, my intent today, would to probably spend 40 to 45 minutes kind of going over the software. I'll take questions as we go through, but that'll make sure that we have time at the end for any general questions that weren't covered. I'll throw it out to you that I'm always open for suggestions for the software. I had a couple good ones yesterday that I've already started working on. So if you were down by the demo area, if you don't see a sign, but there's a table there, that's me working away in the software in free time. So if you see something that the software doesn't do, please ask. Because this software has gone through over about 450 upgrades since I first started selling it, driven largely by the suggestions of users. All right, so let me show you some of the information that's in here. I'm going to focus primarily on those three things, the students, the faculty, and the facilities. But I'll give you a little bit of background. And there's really no way that we're going to cover everything that the software does in the amount of time we have available. The data driving the software is set up in a hierarchy. So level 1 are the basic building blocks. Level 2 uses information that you define at level 1, and so on. And I'm just going to show a couple things from level 1. Scheduling domains are just ways of categorizing classes and faculty. And actually, this data that I'm going to show you is from our school's schedule for next spring. We have 4 areas in our school, and those acronyms mean something to us, but probably absolutely nothing to you. But it's simply just a way of categorizing. When we get to courses and faculty, it's a way we can filter them. Start times, another basic building block, basic data component. You need to define the set of times at which courses could start. And that's not to say that any one course could start at all of those times, but it's just the list of times that when you look at your schedule, that's what you see. We're going to use that information later on when we get to courses and we say which of those times are valid for each course. One other thing related to start times that I'll cover before we go on to the facilities and the classes and the faculty is how the start times relate to different days of the week. When I first started selling this software, I thought everybody was like Cornell, where if you have a class that meets at 8:40 on Monday, it also meets at 8:40 on Wednesday, right? We have a very regular pattern for classes. Well, I came to find out that that doesn't apply for very many places at all, that some places will have different start times on different days, very flexible meeting days for courses, whereas we have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. many other places have much more flexibility in terms of which days of the week they meet. This screen really allows you to define the rules that define what the schedule looks like. And so we're looking here at courses that start at 8:40, and basically we're telling the software that in the schedule you would typically see courses starting at 8:40 that meet 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, Wednesday, courses 2 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and then courses that meet 1 day a week, Monday through Friday. Again, the point is that the software is designed to deal with your environment rather than forcing you to fit into the constraints of the software. And so if you have a much more flexible situation, I'll just show you how you can add, for example, all the courses that meet 2 days, all the patterns for courses that meet 2 days a week. If you have a very flexible situation, you can define that. And the software would use whatever flexibility you allow it. These start times, matching up with the days, might be different with different start times. So I showed you the ones at 8:40. If I showed you the ones at 9 o'clock for our school, there's nothing there. 9:05, same patterns, but 8:30, different set of patterns. There's no reason why the same start times have to apply every day of the week. So basically, you're defining some rules up front that describe what the schedule is going to look like. When we get to an individual course, there's overrides for all of this. And so you can constrain a particular course to using these patterns or ones that are specific to an individual course. If there's one point where users get stuck when they're learning this software, this is it. Because this, in some ways, is the trickiest thing to sort of get your mind around to define what those patterns are like. It's not crucial since you're not going to use the software today, but any questions on that? This is time's up. That means I must have done really well explaining it. Really? Are there any questions on that? Yes?
We have classes that on the same day will be, like one might meet from 11 to 11:50.
Right.
And then during that same time period, we'll have one from 11 to 11:55.
That's okay. Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
it'll handle.
Yep, it'll handle lots of overlaps. Yeah. It's not restricted to you define certain periods, and the classes have to fall within those periods.
Okay.
There could be any number of overlaps.
Okay.
One of the other things you can do with the program is to give certain patterns names, for example, so that we have a 2-division law school, and I split the course assignments up by day required courses, day elective courses, evening required courses, evening elective courses. So I can assign a particular pattern of meetings to a particular type of course.
And here's an example where you can define name patterns and then just apply those to all of your evening classes, for example. So it's a shortcut. All right, let's go on then to first the facilities. And it's designed to be able to schedule on multiple campuses. We just have one campus. Well, we have the medical school in New York City, but the hotel school only has one campus. If you have multiple campuses, it'll factor in travel time between those, so faculty have enough time to relocate. And it will also consider travel time between buildings if faculty or students have to relocate. I'm going to show you the information on one specific room in here. This is our auditorium that has a capacity of 700 students, 700 seats. We can put a minimum size class for that room, right? Because if we've got 700 seats, we probably don't want a class of 10 students in there. A minimum time between courses. This is primarily in here for things like labs, where there's a significant amount of time to clean up for one class and get ready for the next. So you might have an hour time between classes of changeover time. Most classroom environments, 5 or 10 minutes is sufficient. Desirability is in here to deal with situations where the rooms are not all equally good. This will happen in situations where you've got some old rooms and some new rooms. You know, if your facility's in the process of being renovated. They may have the same physical characteristics, but the rooms are just not as nice. And what this does then is make sure that the more desirable rooms have bigger classes, so they're filled more fully to capacity, and that there are more classes in there. So you get your best utilization from your best space. For the attributes, there's nothing showing on this one primarily because it's such a large room, but if I want to define those, I get the list of attributes that we defined earlier, and we can just simply spec out the attributes that exist in that room. So that then later on, when we get to the course, we can say which attributes does the course require and which attributes does it desire in a room. Down below, we see a couple things. The green is ideal time, so it means it's generally available. Red is unavailable. Red, in this case, Cornell schedules some classes in our auditorium, so we have to work around that. So by blocking it out in advance, nothing ever gets scheduled in that time. To change it, in our school, I'm showing Saturday and Sunday for this demo. That's just a definable parameter, which days a week you meet. For our school, students don't like to take classes on Friday, nor do faculty like to teach them. So we could make that yellow. What yellow means is that it's available, but you shouldn't use it unless you have to. So this is an example here where red is a hard constraint. The software is not going to schedule courses in that red time, unless you do it manually and you have an option to override that. Yellow is a soft constraint, so it says don't do it unless you have to. So many places in the software there's this distinction between the things that you have to do, the hard constraints, and the things that you should do if you can, the soft constraints, the yellow in this case. The gray, if anybody's interested, is a course. So it's HA, we go by numbers that only mean something to us. You can switch between your display being numbers or names, whichever you wish. If I double click that, it'll allow me to jump to the course that's scheduled at that time, the faculty member who's teaching it, or both of those, just a way to navigate through the software. So we can see the faculty member who's teaching that class at that time, and here's the course information. We're going to get to both of that information in a few minutes. So that's the information that's in there. Sorry. Can you hear me well if I just talk without the microphone? Okay. Any questions about the room information? All right, let's go next then to the information on faculty members. And what I'll do is show you my information so I don't need to embarrass anybody else. There's a lot of information in here on each faculty member. And when you look at this and when we go through it, you'll think it's probably daunting to try to collect this information, but you can do it online. We support, we host data collection service so that your faculty can go online, specify the preferences, and that comes right back into the software so that you don't have to enter this manually. Going through the information that's here, I'm going to focus on a couple of things. First, maximum daily free time, 60 minutes. What that's in there is it counts the amount of free time that I have between my classes. And when I put a parameter in here like 60, that's really saying that I want my classes close together in time. You know, I don't want to teach at 8:30 in the morning and then not again until 4 in the afternoon. Minimum overnight hours, if somebody's teaching in the evening one day, how much time do they need before coming in and teaching the next day? Number of teaching days. There's a minimum, ideal, and a maximum. In our school, typically people are on 2 or 3 day schedules. So typically you would see the minimum and maximum being set at 2. Those are hard constraints. The software is going to never schedule somebody for more than 3 days a week, in this case. Would schedule them for 2 days, presuming the course that is being taught is going to meet for 2 days a week. And then the ideal comes into play really between those. But you know, if you ask people in our school what they would want, everybody really would like this, right? You'd like to get paid and not teach. Is it any different in your schools? Now, in that case, the ideal is a soft constraint. It's really only going to get factored in if it's between the range of the minimum and maximum. So really it would make more sense if the ideal was 2 or 3, and then the software will try to accommodate that within the range. Priority for schedule request. When I show this, administrators often ask me to hide this, because they don't really like faculty to know that this field exists in the software. It's in here to weight people differentially. It's a multiplier, so somebody that gets a priority of 100 is going to be treated as twice as important as somebody who gets a priority of 50. Now, in our school, everybody gets 50 as a priority. I disagree with that, but heck, I'm not the boss of my school, right? I'm not the associate dean. I'm a professor. Some schools that use this will link it to your performance review, which to me makes a lot of sense. And if you get a better performance review, you get a higher priority in the software, because presumably you're doing things other than teaching. You're writing and interacting with students. If you're getting a good performance review, let's try to accommodate your schedule to facilitate those other things. I know in Dawn's school, do you want to share what you're doing?
Well, it opens up wonderful opportunities for punitive scheduling if you're into that, because you can give somebody a priority of 1. But the other thing that this does is allow you to identify the people that you have that are really difficult schedulers, and to decide how much leeway you want to give them. I mean, we have one faculty member who, although we're north of New York City, lives in Maryland, and therefore would like to teach on Wednesdays from 12:30 to 1:30, and that's it. And you can weight the preferences to sort of say, well, how seriously are we going to consider that? And it's quite useful. Although I must say, Gary, I find that preference idea better with respect to classrooms, which we were talking about before, and to some extent with respect to courses, than with respect to individual faculty members, because it's awfully heavy-handed.
And you do have the opportunity to do it really with respect to rooms, with respect to courses or faculty. Bill, do you know how you're weighting it? Pepperdine?
I think we're doing 50%
across the board. Okay. Some people will do it based on seniority, right? Perhaps untenured professors get a higher priority because of the demands of trying to get tenure. You can give them a schedule that facilitates that. Really, it's in here to do with what you will. Yeah.
If you give everybody equal priority on that, isn't it possible that based on what the faculty say that they want to teach, when they want to teach, that you could just realize you can't schedule? You don't have enough classes at the times.
That's a
and so what do you
really
do
good question.
that?
Can I answer that in just a minute? I'm going to show you some stuff that will help us answer that. A couple other things on preferences. The top right there, wishes regarding consecutive courses. That's how do you want your courses sequenced in the same day. If you're teaching more than one, you're indifferent. I've been told that faculty are never indifferent to anything. I shouldn't even have that field in there, but there are a few I think that truly are indifferent. The good team players. The desire, that's not saying that I'm a good team player, that's just what I'm showing here for this example. The desire would say you want your classes back-to-back, close together, preferably in the same room. The room option would say I want them close together, but they're only if they're in the same room. One that seems to be common in law schools is to avoid having classes close together, in which case you could have a hard constraint, say 60 minutes between them, and ideally perhaps 2 hours. So again, that idea of hard constraints and soft constraints is going to ensure that there's at least 60 minutes to try to give 120. Possible course assignments, I've got a couple there, but actually neither of those are being taught next spring, so that's why there's nothing showing up in the actual. And if I was actually scheduled for something, it would be showing up in gray down here. Now, if you look at me, I'm obviously preferring to be on a Monday-Wednesday schedule. But I could end up teaching any of the 5 days of the week. In the evening, we don't have a lot of evening classes, so typically people are set as unavailable in the evening, just as a function of our school. To answer your question, what I'd like to do is kind of show you as we go through here. I'm going to show you preferences from a number of faculty. Because the point of this is that there are complementary preferences, that not everybody wants the same thing. And so I'm going to scroll through, and I'd like you to just focus on the bottom part here. It's easier to look at. And just see the differences as to what is green versus yellow versus red for different faculty. significant differences. Right? Some people like morning schedules, some people like afternoon schedules, some people like middle of the day, some people like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, some people like Tuesday, Thursday. It's really only having a tool that can use the information and collecting the information that you can actually get a better schedule. So that's part of the answer to your question, is that my experience is there is a lot of complementary preferences out there, and that the software is able to exploit that. The second thing is, though, what could happen? This is sort of showing a case where there's a lot of red. What's the downside to this? It's really related to your question. I mean, what could happen? This person's going to, let's say, teach 2 classes. What if we set their availability to that's the risk. That in this case we have restricted their availability so much that we might not get a schedule. And so the question is, to whom do you, or for whom do you do this? Ideas?
Yourself.
Yeah, well, Don does it, so I don't get to do it in my school, but Don gets to do it in his school, so he does that for himself. Adjuncts are often done like that, right? You've got to work around their schedule so that they're available perhaps at only restricted times. You can do that. If you let everybody do that, then you could get exactly the situation that you'd be worried about, which is there may not be a way to get everything scheduled. And so the way we handle that is that our faculty get to pick what's green versus yellow, what's ideal versus non-ideal, but they don't get to set their red. They don't get to set their unavailable. And so if somebody wants to have unavailable like this, it's got to be an arrangement with the associate dean who said, yeah, that's okay. All right, so again, the point of complementary preferences, the software is able to exploit that, look for answers that provide good solutions to, or good accommodations to the requests of a lot of faculty members. Any questions on faculty before I leave it? Let me show you next courses. And I will say that you have to define each section of each course separately. So for example, if you've got a contracts class and you've got 4 sections of that, each of them have to be defined in the software because they may have different people teaching them, they may have different room requirements, they may have different time requirements if it's a day versus an evening program. I'm going to show you some of the information related to courses. A lot in here, but I'm only going to focus on some of it. First thing, there's a field here that identifies the estimated enrollment. The software will use that when it's making room assignments. There's really a hard constraint and a soft constraint perspective with regard to enrollment. So it's going to try to make sure that the estimated enrollment is a soft constraint. It's going to try to get that if possible. But we can also define a hard constraint to say what is the minimum acceptable room size for this class. Here, this class is part of a program of study that fills every semester, so we know that class is going to be full. We know we need 60 seats for that. If, though, that class was maybe something new, taught by a new professor, I don't know if I'm going to get 60 or not. I think we might, but I could say, make sure that I have at least 40 seats. So that would be communicated into the software which ones really have to have enough seats and which ones is there some uncertainty about. If we're doing it by attribute, if we're matching courses to rooms by attribute, we can also identify what characteristics exist. So I could say that it's got to have air conditioning and anthropological artifacts. Now, the students, if you were to ask them to say, what do you mean about anthropological artifacts? They exist in every room because that's the faculty. I kid you not, this is a characteristic of some room at Cornell. This is Cornell's whole list of attributes. In some room, there is anthropological artifacts. Maybe it's a joke, I'm not sure. But in this case, the R indicates a required, so it's required to have air conditioning, required to have at least 50 seats, desired to have the artifacts, and required to be in this particular building. Another way to do a matching of a course to a room is to just simply select the list of rooms. So if we did it that way, we could say, okay, this class has to be in either 165 or 265. With either of those, really you can think of the by attribute or the room list as defining what's acceptable. You could also put in some preferences for rooms. So here, even though 165 or 265 would work, I can say that 165 is the preferred room, and so the software will try to accommodate that if possible. What's some other information in here? Priority. Donna mentioned the ability to prioritize certain classes, and from our discussion yesterday, my guess is that your priority is higher on your evening classes because you said those things are harder to schedule.
Well, yeah. The way it works out is the evening schedule drives the day, but there's another way around it, and that is you can schedule pieces of your curriculum separately, so that when I sit down to do the schedule, I can, for example, schedule the evening electives first, and then lock that in, and then go schedule the day electives. And the software will take into account that that evening schedule is locked, and so it can look at faculty preferences and number of teaching days in light of that. And so there are a couple of different ways you can do it.
Exactly. I think that they're equivalent ways of doing the same thing, which you get pretty much a similar effect by bumping up the priority on those classes. Let's see, what else? Oh, maximum start spread. That controls how much difference there is in the start times. So if it's 0, that basically says there can be no difference in the start times of that class. If it starts at 8:40 one day, it's got to start at 8:40 on another day. If it's 120 minutes, it will allow that start time to vary as much as 2 hours. For the valid meeting lengths, this class is defined as meeting 2 days a week for 75 minutes each. I can also give the software other options. Say perhaps this course can meet 1 day a week for 150 minutes. And maybe even do things like 3 days a week each for 50 minutes. Now then from that, which the software will pick will depend on what's best for the facility, what's best for the students, and what's best for the faculty members. And I did fix your suggestion. Dawn had a suggestion here related to the screen that's going to be fixed in the next version that comes out. The thing down below here, to use the globally defined days offered patterns, that's those things that I was showing you earlier that it said that it's sometimes confusing for people. The default is to use the ones we defined back in level 2. If I choose not to use the default, I can, for example, apply the named pattern, again related to what Dawn was saying about, if this is a set of patterns that apply for evening classes or day classes, I can just pick it, and then it will use whatever set of patterns I've defined for that. Or I can define custom patterns here for this particular class. Got a lot of flexibility. Allowable timing, if I change that, that's just going to be the list of all the times that we defined earlier, and we can say which times apply for this class. Faculty members, one person is listed here. If I, in this case, put 2 people on the list, now that's a team-taught class. Both of them are scheduled for the class. They both have to be available for it. Right now, I've been showing you this in the mode where you're going to pre-specify who teaches every class. There is a way that you can let the software pick the instructor. And most of the users don't do that, and the software is designed to be able to do that. If you run it in that mode, you can say, okay, I can list 2 people who are skilled to teach it and tell the software to pick one. And it would do that based on their skill for the class, their preference for the class, their workload requirements, limitations on the number of course preparations that they could do, as well as how that fits into the student schedule. So there are a lot of things considered there. Down below, we can set the availability the same as we could with rooms and faculty members. And I'm going to come back and show you a little later how we can manually change the schedule if we need to do that. And then one thing, last thing on courses before I leave this, Dawn mentioned about locking in courses. And what that means, locking in means if I run a schedule, a second schedule, what from the first schedule has to stay the same. So this can be used in a variety of ways. Dawn suggested one where he runs the evening program first, locks it in, and then runs the day. You can also do it, for example, let's say my schedule's already built, right? But I need to find what's the best time for a new section of the class. So I can lock everything else in, let that one section be free, and the software would then find the best time for that, given everything else locked in position. So you can use the lock-in in a variety of ways. Any questions on courses before I leave? Yes?
Is there a way to actually see what I guess like requires measure or review?
Indirectly, yes. The software the files in the software are essentially like documents. So, as we go from one semester to the next, we just use a save as, essentially start with the information from the previous semester. So we always have a history. I get back to '98, so I can go back through and look at what the schedules were. When I come up with the data files right now are Access databases. I'm coming out with a version of this that will support a higher performance database, either a SQL Server or my SQL, and that will store the history right in the file.
So at this point, is the program actually networkable?
Yes, it is. Yeah, the files can sit on, the files have to sit on a shared drive. The software has to be installed on whoever's computer sitting in it. The only parts of the software right now that are web-enabled are the data collection for students and for faculty. Other questions on courses? All right, so we've sort of gone through quickly levels 1, 2, and 3. And level 4 is some of the most important information of all. That deals with how do courses relate to each other, and also where do students get factored into the process. One of the most important capabilities is the ability to define what we call program groups, or program course groups. And, excuse me, these are simply a group of classes within which there should be no conflict, or within which there should be minimal conflict. Now, in our school, we have, I think, 180 students in our freshman core taking 4 to 6 classes, and each of those classes vary in size from 18 students to 60 students. And so we have to create a bunch of groups, each of which has a certain number of students in it, and for each of those groups we have to make sure that there's no conflict in the courses they're taking. So here's our first block. It's at 16 students, and those 16 students are taking this set of 4 classes. And the key thing to note is that it's set to prohibit time conflict. So this is what ensures that you like for your 1Ls, that when they're taking a group of classes together, that there's no conflict for those. You can also create groups where the goal is not to totally prohibit conflict, but your goal is to avoid conflict, and I'll show you that we do that for our junior core. The reason we don't prohibit it is that there's just too many course offerings in there to given the number of time slots we have. We just say try to spread them around as much as possible, and that will give students choice. And you can do that for concentrations. If you have, for example, an environmental law concentration, 3 or 4 classes in it, you could say try to spread them around the time, and that would increase students' ability to get those classes. You could probably also do it in your situation. You can put priorities on here, so you could put a higher priority on the evenings than on the days. Other types of relationships between classes, if you have joint listed or cross-listed courses, you can define groups for those. That's basically courses that have 2 different numbers, but it's the same course. Courses that have to meet in the same day. Courses that have to meet on different days. Courses that should meet simultaneously, sequentially. So lots of ways to define relationships between courses. For the students, what we've been doing for the past several years is, it's unusual, I think, in a university setting. Typically what you do is you build the schedule and then students sign up for classes. And what we've been doing is we publish a list of classes that we intend to offer, and we say to the students, tell us what you want to take. And you can also allocate a certain number of points. And so here's a person that wants to take 3 classes, weights of 30, 20, and 50. The weight on this, the priority that this student is getting is 50. There's 5 classes. Weight of 50. Here's 5 classes, a weight of 70. How do you think we're setting the, so there's 70, 70, 70, 70. There's an 80. How do you think we're weighting students?
Here.
Which year? Yeah, that's right, closer to graduation. So the idea is that they leave the school very happy. They'll think of us with their checkbooks in the long run. Right, so our second-year graduate students get a higher priority than first-year graduate students, and seniors get a higher priority than juniors, and so on. Once that's in, the software will use that information when it builds the schedule. We used to build it based on what faculty thought, and we thought we were actually doing a really good job. Because what we would do, we would create groups of classes within which there shouldn't be conflict or minimal conflict. So for example, I might say, I teach a class in service operations management. Students like to take that with a marketing class. I could say, my class and the marketing class shouldn't be taught at the same time. So we had created a number of these relationships where we thought we were, getting a really student-friendly schedule. Turns out, when we actually looked at what students wanted to take, we might as well have not used any faculty information. It did not help us at all. All of that stuff that we thought was helping was not helping at all. When we went directly to what students wanted to take, we were able to give 1 in 4 students an extra class a semester. So essentially improving satisfaction for 25% of our customers at no cost. You might ask, well, why are faculty dumb? Any faculty in the room? 2 of us. We'll close our eyes. You can all nod, right? Faculty are dumb sometimes, but that's not the problem. It's, if a student comes to me and says, I can't take your class because something else offered at the same time, what that misses is all the other students who were happy with the way it was. So essentially we're getting bad information. And then there's also changes in preferences over time that, if preferences change, there's a lag between when the preferences change and when faculty become aware of those changes. So it's actually worked really well for us, and I'm surprised that more of the users of the software have not been taken advantage of that capability. All right, so once the data's in, then you get the interface to the scheduler. And this is what the scheduler was what was running when we started. There's a lot of criteria here, and you get to set the priority on those criteria. So you get to tell the software what are the most important things to you. There's no predefined value system in the software. It allows you to say, for your environment, here's what's important. These criteria are the ones, actually they're not, I changed this based on the demo yesterday. Notice as I change those and I'm just going to save them, it's going to reorder them based on most to least important. So in our school, this is roughly the ordering that we use. For us, getting a student-friendly schedule is the most important thing. So we want to try to avoid conflict for courses. So if we do that, that means the students are able to take the things they want. For us, the second most important thing is that yellow time for courses, trying to avoid Friday afternoon courses because really nobody likes them. Then trying to give faculty their ideal number of teaching days. Then give them the faculty their preferences for consecutive courses. Do they want them close together or far apart? So once you've set those, then you can run the auto-scheduler. Now let me explain what we're seeing. It's now generated 100 schedules here in whatever that is, under 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, it generated 250 or so. The first schedule that it comes up with, every performance measure is normalized to 100. So it's sort of just a reference. Every time it finds a schedule that's better than any of the ones that it's found before, it puts out a new point on the chart. All of these criteria, lower is better. So the lines ideally would all come down to 0. But the order in the legend is from most important to least important. So it's run now for 40 seconds, and we could say course timing conflict is now down under 30. What that means is that compared to the first schedule that it found, the software has been able to eliminate more than 70% of the conflict that existed in the schedule. So clearly the students are better off than they were in our first attempt. Now you might say, well, yeah, students are better off because that was your most important criterion. How about faculty? Well, if you look at the yellow and green, the third and fourth criteria, they're also better than they were initially as well. So not only do we have a schedule that better meets the needs of students, we've also got a schedule that better meets the needs of faculty. And typically what I recommend that people do is set it up and let it run overnight. And you can overnight generate easily 1 million or more schedules, and then the software is going to give you back the one that best satisfies your criteria. Questions on this? I mean, this is the whole point. Is once the data's in, that this optimizer that's in here is really able to look at all the criteria and find one that makes everybody better off. Find the schedule, I mean. I can interrupt this at any point. This is actually probably a good idea to see how well it's working. Course time conflicts. The only conflicts that are here were in the junior core. And remember, that was the one that I said I could have conflict. I'm trying to avoid it, but there just wasn't enough time slots to totally get rid of the conflict. It will never schedule conflict for those things that we say prohibit conflict. So prohibit conflict is a hard constraint. Unassigned courses. Okay, there's 2 things that are unassigned. I'm actually going to stop this right now. I'm going to look at why that might have been, the reasons for that. Let's save the schedule. I can save the schedule, and if I want to continue the search, not a problem. Interrupting it just and resuming continues where it left off. I'm going to end that and load that schedule in that we had just saved. And we'll come back with a list of the courses that were unassigned. Now we've got 2 of them. 744, it's been able to figure out a time, but hasn't yet got a room. And 365, it hasn't been able to assign a time or a room. So I'm curious as to know why that might be. If I double-click that, it'll let me view the course, analyze the schedule, which is what I'm going to pick. It's going to go through and look at all the time options for that course and tell me what would have happened if it had been scheduled at each of those times, so that we'll get an idea of why might that not have been scheduled. So Monday at 8:40, it exceeds the maximum hours for the junior core. There was a limit on how many hours that we could schedule per day for that core. Monday 10:10, looks like there's a room issue. Same with Monday at 11:40. So it looks like there may be some room issues, because the only one that problem otherwise is option 5 there, where it's in the professor's busy time. So it may be an issue with the room. That might be able to be resolved if I run it longer, or I may have an issue with that specific class. So let's just view the course. Okay, so it's restricted to being in one or the other of those rooms, and that is just a tightly constrained rooms for us. If we run it longer, that class should end up actually getting scheduled. So even though it wasn't able to find it in that short run, if we run it longer, it should eventually be able to schedule that. Because what I can do, for example, I can just run an analysis here from the course and see what might happen. And again, it's the same kind of analysis that we saw earlier. It's really just the fact that there's a problem with the room that seems to be the issue. All right, so the schedule's run. I want to show you quickly some of the reports. There's a ton of reporting capabilities in the software. We'll go back to the full list. There's some predefined reports that are set up in a predefined format that you can print or view within the software. There's a lot of export reports, there's violation reports, so for example, it would tell us if there's any faculty member double booked. The software itself will never schedule somebody to be double booked, but if you're manually editing it, it will allow you to double book them if you so choose. Let me show you some of the exports. There's a number of HTML exports. I'm going to generate these because they're fast to generate. And load those in. Okay, these all display the schedule in some kind of a grid format. This is the faculty grid. Has the days in the rows, the times in the columns. You might say, well, what are those times in there? Those are times that we selected for these reports. You have the option of doing it on a half-hour basis, an hour basis, or to use certain start times. So those are the prime start times for classes in our school. This is the course grid by room. The days are listed one below each other. We've got the times here and the rooms and the columns, and so that we can look down each room essentially and see what's going on each day of the week. We color code courses by the type of course it is. So for us, green is a marketing class, so we can look at the schedule and visually get a sense for what's going on. Here's a similar layout. The course grid doesn't have the room information, although you can include the room information in the cells as an option. And so it's just another way of seeing the overall schedule, so what it looks like. And we can also view a room grid. It shows us room by room what's scheduled. And for each of those, there's alternate layouts. So for the course grid, there's two other layouts that change the orientation of that report. Somebody had a good suggestion yesterday, which is let the users select the fonts for those reports. So I've been working on that today to let the users select the fonts for these particular reports instead of just default Times New Roman. So lots of report capabilities in the software. There's lots of exports. If there's something that you want to do that isn't in here, you can write a structured query language query on the underlying database and have that exported to Excel, for example. So there's lots of reporting capability. One last thing that I'll show you is, after you've run the reports and you generate the schedule, you run the reports, and send it out to faculty for review. Invariably, what happens is that there's something that needs to be changed. It's rarely perfect. Something got left out. If it's a significant change, major piece of information left out, you probably want to rerun the schedule. But if it's just a relatively minor change, you can do it within the software, manually schedule something. I'm going to pick something that I hope will have some good information in here. So if I change the schedule, I can run a reschedule analysis. It will ask me, do I want to observe all the hard constraints or not? If I say yes, it will make sure that it will only give me times that don't violate any constraints. If I run it again and say no, it will give me more options, but also allow me to violate constraints. So for example, the first option here said, yeah, you can do it, but you're going to be in red time, unavailable time for that professor. And these reports will also show us the implication of moving it from the student perspective. So how many students can't take it at each of the times that we could be offered. So that's in there because when you make manual changes, there are so many things going on that it's difficult to keep track of all of these things in your head. So the software is really designed to facilitate those manual changes. So that in 50 minutes is a very quick overview of the software. Let me open up to general questions and a stump the presenter time. Is there anything that you think it ought to do that you haven't seen? Because either I haven't shown it to you or it doesn't exist in the software. Yes?
Like, yeah, maybe like do style sheets in it, and then like FTP up to web servers. Yeah, so you can like publish the schedule.
Oh, yeah, that isn't in here right now. It's, I mean, they just come out to a folder.
Yeah,
So-
be able to like take that HTML and
Right.
actually post it somewhere.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. Let me make a note of that.
And you can send royalty checks.
Well, I'm a discount.
Yeah, what for discount? We're making suggestions.
Other questions? All right, we have some information. I left some business cards there. There is a free 60-day trial for the software. So if you're interested in trying it out or having somebody at your school try it out, you can take advantage of that. We've got a number of, I think, 9 or 10 law schools that are using it right now, and it seems like the fit's pretty good for what the capabilities of the software are versus the needs of scheduling in a law environment. And I think part of the reason for that is that you have to deal in a law school with all of the things that the software is designed to cover, which are, you have faculty that you have to accommodate, you have students that you have to accommodate, and then you generally own your own facility, so that's, you're managing that facility as well. If you have any questions that are afraid to ask, you can ask them after we're finished here. So, thank you.